The engines were already coughing to life, a low thunder rolling across the cracked asphalt like a storm about to break, when something small and fragile cut through the noise and froze the moment in place. A barefoot little boy stood at the edge of the lot, arms raised, eyes wide with a fear far bigger than his body, waving with everything he had as if the whole world depended on it. The leather-clad men with skulls stitched on their backs, the long beards, the tattoos faded by sun and years, all of it seemed too heavy for a child to stop, yet somehow he did. Before this story pulls you any deeper, take a second and tap like, leave a comment, share this with someone you care about, and subscribe if you believe in kindness and second chances, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story belongs to anyone who's ever hoped that strangers could still save one another. The boy's name was Oliver Reed, 7 years old, small for his age, with dust on his knees and a shirt that had once been blue. He lived in a forgotten trailer park just beyond the highway where a chapter of the Hells Angels often gathered before long rides. Oliver had grown up watching the motorcycles arrive like a moving wall of noise and chrome, watched adults cross the road to avoid them, watched his mother pull him closer whenever the engines roared. His father had been gone for 2 years, taken by a night drive that never came back, and since then Oliver had learned to pay attention to sounds, to silences, to anything that felt wrong. That afternoon felt wrong in a way he could not explain, like the air itself was holding its breath. The bikers were preparing to ride out, laughter mixed with revving engines, boots striking pavement, when Oliver noticed the thin plume of smoke drifting from behind the oldest bike in the line, the one with scratches that looked like scars. To him it did not look like normal smoke, it looked like the beginning of a fire, like the kind that steals things away before you even know it has started. Fear made his legs move before his mind could catch up. Oliver ran, heart banging in his chest, past rusted fences and broken bottles, toward men everyone told him to stay away from. His mother's warnings echoed in his head, but louder than all of it was the thought that if those bikes rolled forward, something terrible would happen. He did not think about consequences or courage or danger, he only thought about stopping them. When he reached the edge of the lot, the heat from the engines wrapped around him, and for a moment he almost turned back. But then he smelled something sharp and wrong, and he knew he had to try. The men noticed him then, some with irritation, some with surprise, some with a flicker of something softer they had forgotten how to name. The leader of the group, a tall man named Jack Mercer with silver in his beard and lines on his face carved by years of wind and regret, was used to being looked at with fear. He had been called many things in his life, few of them kind, and he wore that reputation like armor. Seeing a child step into their space stirred something uncomfortable in him, a distant memory of his own son he had not spoken to in a decade. The bikes were seconds away from pulling out when Oliver finally reached them, breathing hard, pointing toward the rear of the line with frantic insistence. The sound of engines dipped and wavered as curiosity replaced annoyance. Something in the boy's eyes told Jack this was not a prank or a dare, it was panic mixed with resolve. Jack shut off his engine, and one by one, the others followed, the sudden quiet ringing in their ears. They moved toward the bike Oliver had been pointing at, and that was when they saw it clearly. A fuel line beneath the tank had cracked, leaking slowly onto hot metal, the smoke a warning just before disaster. One spark on the open road, one wrong turn, and the bike would have become a fireball, possibly taking others with it. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. A few of the bikers cursed under their breath, not in anger but in shaken relief. These were men who had faced fights, prison cells, funerals of friends taken too young, and yet the closest call many of them had ever had was stopped by a child's instinct and courage. As they worked to fix the problem, tools appearing from saddlebags, Oliver stood back, suddenly aware of how small he was among them. The adrenaline drained, replaced by trembling legs and a tight throat. Jack noticed and knelt down beside him, lowering himself not just physically but emotionally, the hard edges of him softened by gratitude he did not know how to express. Oliver thought he would be yelled at, told to leave, but instead he felt a heavy jacket settle gently over his shoulders, warm and smelling of oil and road dust. In that moment, something shifted for everyone watching. These men were no longer symbols of fear, and the boy was no longer just a kid from a trailer park. They were people meeting at the exact point where lives intersect for a reason. News of what happened spread quickly through the small town. Some refused to believe it, preferring old stories to inconvenient truths, but others began to look differently at the men on motorcycles and at the child who had run toward danger. Jack found himself thinking about Oliver long after the ride resumed safely, thinking about how close he had come to losing everything again without even knowing it. A week later, he returned to the trailer park, not with a roaring engine but with a quiet knock on a door. He brought groceries, fixed a broken step, and listened more than he spoke. One visit turned into many. Other bikers followed, helping with repairs, school supplies, small acts that slowly rewrote the stories people told about them. For Oliver, life did not suddenly become easy or perfect. His father was still gone, money was still tight, and the world was still unpredictable. But he carried something new inside him, a knowledge that his voice mattered, that courage could come from the smallest places, and that even the most intimidating faces could hide grateful hearts. At school, he struggled, but he no longer felt invisible. At home, his mother slept a little easier knowing there were people nearby who looked out for them. The day he saw the motorcycles again, parked neatly and quietly as the men volunteered at a local food drive, he felt a strange warmth spread through him, as if the world had expanded just enough to make room for hope. Years passed, and stories like this often fade, but this one lingered. Jack eventually reconnected with his own son, the first message awkward, the second honest, the third full of things neither had ever said before. He credited a brave little boy for reminding him of who he used to be before anger hardened him. The chapter continued to ride, but they also stayed, showing up for fundraisers, emergencies, and neighbors who needed help. Not everyone forgave them, not everyone trusted them, but that no longer mattered as much as it once had. If this story has reached something tender inside you, if it reminded you that humanity can surprise us in the best ways, please take a moment now to like the video, share it, and subscribe, because your engagement helps stories like this travel further and remind more people that compassion still exists. And right before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. Please comment the word hope if you believe that even one small act of bravery can change many lives. On that afternoon, when engines were silenced by a child's fear and care, fate quietly shifted its course. No headlines were written, no monuments built, but something just as powerful happened. A boy learned his courage mattered, and a group of men remembered their humanity. Sometimes the most shocking discoveries are not hidden beneath metal and fuel, but beating quietly inside people we were taught never to trust, waiting for a moment that reminds us all who we really are.